Hello YouTube. Today I'm going to make a video on a requested topic. The title of my presentation here I've called Living Like an RPG, Winning a Mindset. Welcome to my seminar. Um, so there's this idea out there that life is like a role-playing game in many ways. It probably should go the other way around, that the reason that role-playing games are so interesting to people is because they share a lot of commonalities with real life, only there's some different things about them that make them an engaging kind of game to play. So let me first just give a quick definition that I wrote. Role-playing game, popular genre of usually nowadays computer games, typically driven by developing or growing a character to fight increasingly difficult enemies, acquire increasingly valuable items, etc. Popular variant of these is the MMORPG, or massively multiplayer role-playing game, which basically means you and a bunch of other people go around in a virtual world and do these activities of leveling up and stuff together. Oftentimes these games will have some form of economy, which makes it interesting. So there will be rare items that people might go out and do boring tasks to get money, and then use that money to buy items and so on and so forth. So there's whole different, more interesting dimensions when other people get involved. An MMORPG is like an RPG with the social aspect. So just for some background on this topic, I wrote about this topic a while back, and I'll pull up when I did that. So this is my personal blog, which got pretty spicy during 2020, especially at the height of the pandemic. This one I wrote on Monday, the 23rd of March, 2020. And since I've written this note, or written this blog post, I've added this cautionary note. Looks like I did that in November of that month of 2020. I said, stay away. Any imagination visualization technique that separates you from reality is dangerous. More on that in a bit. Let me just share this blog post. So here, I'll read this. Imagine yourself from a third-person perspective. Watch yourself from someone else's viewpoint. What is this person like? Are they acting in a self-destructive way? Are they good to others? Are they idealistic but utterly incompetent? How would you describe yourself in a novel? The idea here is to look at yourself objectively, putting aside present feelings for a moment. How would you evaluate your behavior? And then I just elaborate a little bit about how, if you consider yourself kind of like how someone might consider their character playing a game, then you could intellectually be able to give yourself good advice. Basically, look objectively. What am I doing well? What am I not doing so well? And fix stuff. On this note about imagination, deception, avoiding these things, I will add that in a recent video by a fellow Luke Smith, who has a lot of overlapping interests and life choices with me, in a very recent video, September 19th, 2022, posted this video about imagination. And one work he cites that's listing how imagination is dangerous is actually a book that I have been using for a while, which is called the Jordanville Prayer Book. So this is an Orthodox Christian prayer book. If you watch the Luke Smith video here, you'll be able to see this comment as well. But one thing that is mentioned in this book, in the prayers here, are warnings against imagining things, vain, idle delusions, things like this, because these could be very dangerous. And although they make the plot lines of a lot of movies and popular culture saying, follow your dreams, use your imagination. If you could imagine it, you could build it, and so on and so forth. If you investigate further the Christian Orthodox tradition specifically, you'll see that there have long been many warnings against that sort of behavior. Um, so with that being said, here with this presentation that I'm going to give on RPGs and how they could be useful, do heed this word of caution about not going crazy with your imagination, because when you're not actively watching or trying to concentrate your mind on something, if you're just being taken away by whatever you might be thinking, then lots of dangerous stuff could happen. So do proceed with caution. All right, let me flip over to my notes and I'll start to go through my presentation here. So right away, here's my main takeaway. RPGs offer an intellectual exercise to learn how to optimally lead a goal-oriented life. Crucially, RPGs differ from real life in the following ways. So the goals in the game are arbitrary, defined by game makers. So why should you make your character stronger? Why should you click these buttons and deliver this item to such and such? I mean, there's no real meaning. That's why it's a game. It's made up by someone. But what I'm saying is an intellectual exercise. I think that by studying RPGs and maybe even playing one at some point in your life, there are things to learn. This one's important. Considerable less suffering is involved. So to train strength in the game, you don't actually have to lift weights. You just click buttons and that somehow click strength. I think like anybody would intellectually agree that if every day you did 100 push-ups, that would be good for you. Yet how many people actually do that at the end of the day? This is to say RPGs offer an intellectual exercise where you could agree that all sorts of things are a good idea or that makes sense, but that knowledge is only so good insofar as you actually use it to do something. Finally, here, how you live your life here and now will determine how you experience eternity. You cannot just uninstall, restart, or like reincarnate. It's not up to us to decide life and death and all these things. So one could play a game, mess around, just try stuff and do things, but the clock keeps on ticking, and nobody knows the day and the hour when they're going to go right away. So living our lives, of course, it's not like a game insofar as the stakes are much higher. So this following presentation is a neutral technical analysis about how stuff works. That is like, if somebody, it's just like if you teach somebody how to fish, they could use feed the enemy forces with a fish, right? So it's not the fishing instructor's job to tell you what to do with the fish that you catch, but just how to fish. So with that being said, this analysis I'm giving here is just telling you how I see things. It's more descriptive, but what goals and things you should do, that's not up to me. Okay, so important lessons. These are, I think I made 4 main points that I think are useful to learn from an RPG. So the first one, make it easy to do the right thing. Here, I'll read what I wrote. To win at games, you need to make it very easy to do the right thing. For this reason, people will spend a lot of money on computer peripherals, keyboards, mice, your gaming PC. I'm using a Bugman trackable here, stable internet connection, and so on. Okay, so in an RPG, the number of actions you could do is restricted by the game's programming. Typically, important actions like movement, looking around, attacking, defending, buying, selling, and so on, they're right there. So in a game controller, you just move your thumbs a little bit, you move your hands a little bit. It's typically very easy to do the things that you need to do. So in your life, you could ask this question: do I make it easy for me to do the things that I want to do? So for instance, like if you're studying a foreign language, do you have a project set up, such as working through a book? So if I'm studying, if I say that I'm studying Chinese, then I should immediately be able to answer the question, all right, to advance my Chinese skill level, what can I do to do that? And if I have to think about it or find or dig through a box or something to do that, then I am not set up to make progress in that. Contrast this with a video game, with the RPG, all the buttons and stuff are right there in front of you. So an RPG makes it very easy to keep on playing because it's like all the things that you need in order to do what you're doing, it's all right there. It's on the computer. So with your own stuff, if you set things up, take that insight that if things are at hand, easy to access, it's easier to make progress. That will help you a lot. Okay. Lesson number 2, cut out distractions. In an RPG, to win, you often need to focus and specialize. One common attribute of RPG games is classes of playable characters. For instance, in fantasy games, the user will often choose between classes like swordsman, archer, magician, and so on. Depending on what class you play, you will purchase different items, talk with different NPCs, that's non-playable characters. Like to go to a store, you might click on somebody, and then all these items you could buy might come up. Right. So if you don't specialize, like let's just say, oh, I want to be a kind of a magician, kind of a swordsman, and you start like spending all your resources going more than one way, then the effect of that will be you might be unable to defeat increasingly powerful enemies in the game. And if it's a multiplayer type game, your character will just be weaker than it should be. So you'll lose, and other people, unless they're being losers too, won't want to hang out with you and play with you. So you'll just be like you by yourself, celebrating how unique you are, and everybody else being like, well, why don't you help us do what we're doing? That's another topic for another time about how that's a trap. Okay, so the application I came up from this observation about focus and specialization is that like we likewise need to set up and specialize stuff a lot of the time. So oftentimes we'll have a lot of different options available to us for things that we can do, and they all might be good in of themselves even. So for instance, if you're going to join an orchestra, you might be deciding like, should I play the viola or the oboe? And there's nothing inherently wrong with playing either a viola or oboe, either choice. But if you're kind of oscillating between too many different things, then you might not make progress at any one of them. And the effect will be with that, number one, you will feel defeated, you might become disheartened, and you might not be able to, say, play with more advanced groups and advance your skill. So not only will you feel like you're a loser because you're losing, you might become bitter and butthurt and all these other not so pleasant states because of what you're doing. But also, too, you won't have a clearly useful, defined role interfacing with other people. So like in a game, people might say, oh, we got a swordsman and an archer, now we need like a healing character, magic Chinese herb lady character or something. And if you're like, oh yeah, well I have some skills in Chinese herb lady character, but I'm also a swordsman, they'll be like, we don't want a half swordsman, half herb lady. So oftentimes in life we have to focus, or at least take or develop skills and things we have to a certain acceptable level before moving on and getting other skills or abilities, because if we don't do that, you might end up having spent a lot of time doing a lot of things, really putting forth effort. It wouldn't even be a matter of laziness for a person that has this sort of problem. Like myself, I have this kind of problem. I'm trying to do too many different things, and oftentimes I might try to justify myself saying, oh, I've put in so much hours, I put in so much effort to all these things. And it's like, yes, true, so you do get some reward for doing that, but it's like if that effort had been focused properly, then the payups could be much, much better. Okay, which leads to, I think this is my, not the final point, third point. follow the proper skill tree. So here I wrote, in RPGs, one must often make choices on how to spend experience points of some kind to level up particular skills or abilities. Certain skills may be required before learning other skills. These initial intermediary skills may not be as useful as the final skills, but may be worth learning just because they are requirements of the final goal or skill. Final goal skill. Thus, you may understand that at certain stages your character may be weaker or worse positioned, but you may willingly work this to be stronger later on. So some games may have passive skills, such as for every level up you gain 102% more strength, or for every enemy you defeat you gain something, something, something. I think earlier I had written, why did I delete that? Allen coin. Okay, so oftentimes this sort of skill or ability are good if you plan on making it to late game. Other classes may have flashier, cooler skills early on, with the player going for the late game. But the player going for the late game may choose these sorts of boring skills at first because they intend to make it to a late game. You can see, like, I mean, in life, I think a lot of things work this way. For instance, would you tell a kid not to ride a skateboard or to skateboard? I just made a Jordan Peterson 12 rules for life allusion there. I would say to this that choosing to skateboard or not to skateboard, I mean, things could go well either way. But of course, when you ride a skateboard, there's certain risks that come with it, but also certain potential payoffs could come from it. So if you ride a skateboard, the risks are like you might get injured in some ways. You might get caught up with some people that like to do a lot of drugs or vandalize property and other things. So any of those are paths that could get you down, get you in big trouble. On the other hand, lots of good could come from putting time and effort into something flashy, cool early on. Like if you spent your early youth doing skateboarding, it could be the avenue by which you make a lot of friends. Eventually, it might be something that leads you into more serious other business and things like that. Like you start skateboarding, you become friends with the skate shop, and before you know it, like instead of going to college, you decide to continue working with these people you met at the skate shop, and also you become an entrepreneur in like other business areas and so on and so forth. So even if, like, let's say by age 25, you actually aren't even riding a skateboard anymore. So you could say you wasted that effort riding skateboard. Whereas, let's say you have a friend who says spending their time doing skateboarding, they practice violin all the time. Maybe your violin friend is still playing violin and moving up in the violin world, and you chose skateboarding, and now you don't skateboard. Your skateboarding investment paid off like in different ways because you leveraged an early advantage. Then you're able to be stronger and move forward in other respects. So that's a roundabout way of saying that understand kind of the skill tree that you're getting involved in. For a lot of things, I think that there isn't a right or a wrong answer per se, though you could analyze any activity that you want to do and sort of study where you think it will eventually end up. For me and my upbringing, I would say that I come from a pretty cautious household in many ways. So, for instance, driving really fast or doing like reckless extreme sports or these sorts of things, I didn't really do those things, and that's one of the reasons, for better or worse, why I'm a nerd in repentance, because I did not go out and take these early advantages, sort of betting instead on passive skills or slowly leveling up this kind of approach. And so is what I did better? Is it worse? I mean, one way, for instance, in which you might say that it didn't work or that it's worse is like I know like people younger than me that have already gotten married and have children, and I haven't done that. So, insofar as like that's something I would want to do, or that's a goal that I have, then you could say I failed. I'm lower. I did not have the skill or the intuition that some other people I know did. So I got like all A's in school, and this person got B's and C's. But who's the guy who's making a video by himself on the internet right now, and who's um, spending quality time with the family? I don't know. Maybe my family's watching this. Who knows? Maybe you all are spending quality time with me asynchronously. Okay. So another application for this idea of the skill tree is like looking at these passive skills, like this sort of thing. Sometimes we could choose to do things like invest in skills or areas of our life where we don't do much at once. You don't get tons of reward right away, but through starting to do something over time, you cumulatively will acquire a lot of interest. So I'll give one example for this. I live in California now, grew up in California, and I know tons of Spanish words. I wouldn't say I'm fluent in Spanish, but I know a lot of Spanish words, and one of the reasons is early on I took some Spanish class, so I knew enough Spanish that I could start to build on that. And then just walking around town, I'll see all these signs or hear people speak Spanish, all these just Spanish things, and without expending very much effort at all, just because I started with this one Spanish skill, I passively pick up and learn lots and lots of Spanish over time, such that like if I compared, say, my knowledge of Spanish with my knowledge of I don't know, Georgian or something, some language I don't know anything in, then and I said someone said to me, you have to get your Georgian speaking skills up to your Spanish speaking skills. It might actually take quite a while to do because of this cumulative time interest effect that's going on. All right, and then my final point here about how to be a winner, thinking through stuff like an RPG, is to understand your quote-unquote cooldown times. So here's what I wrote. In video games, timing is often very important. For instance, a character may have some ability that can only be used every 120 seconds. Choosing when to use this ability so that it is available to be useful is of utmost importance. Often buff abilities work this way. So for instance, let's say you have a skill called Monster Energy Drink, and you push a button, and then when you're on Monster Energy Drink, you could move twice as fast as you normally do. That would be an example that we could say in real life we kind of find similar stuff where you could get some immediate payoff or some immediate boost in some ability or something that you have, but it will come at a little bit of price. So like a Monster Energy Drink, I don't know how much they are nowadays, $3 or $4 or something. You could utilize a Monster Energy to say get yourself through 1 or 2 hours of difficulty doing something. Like let's say you have to make a difficult drive or something, and that could really help. So you're willing to spend that money and also the physical digestion and all that that could come. So in our current era, this principle of like cooldowns and taking out something now for later, all this is everywhere. One example is with credit. Personally, I'm quite aversive to loans. I don't like taking out loans. I don't want to take out loans, but I recognize that in our society they're very important to use for a lot of stuff. So I do use credit cards and stuff. Although I, pretty much always just pay them back immediately. But I know people who don't do this, and oftentimes, as I was saying before with the skateboarding example, these sorts of people will actually be much, much more successful than me in many ways because they know how to properly use these things. I'll give one example. of where I could probably have done a lot better um, with credit. When interest rates and stuff were very low, a lot of people locked in fixed rate mortgages at very low rates, so they could pay into eventually owning a home for a relatively cheap price. Um, Whereas now, the interest rates are going up and up and up, so you can't do the same thing on the skill tree. That move has been taken away from us. We can't just do it now. But this is to say that knowing how to skillfully use credit to maximize the use of the resources that you have could be a very valuable thing that, if done properly, could give someone tremendous advantages. So, my application of that, I'll start reading here. Determine when to do what. Something like doing the laundry may be very easy to do at the right time. Like right now, as I'm recording this video, I started to do my laundry right before I did it. But in a hurry, you're already lost. So you can't just say, oh yeah, loading the laundry only takes 15 minutes. Well, it doesn't matter if it only takes it 15 minutes to load and set up your laundry if you're going to go away on a 7-day trip and leave your wet, soggy laundry in the laundry machine. You can't do that. So you have to set a time when you're doing things correctly. So you've already lost if you aren't timing stuff right. So choosing to do tasks in the proper order, understanding how long things take and what requires your active participation and what is done passively means you could do more. So one example here, approaching the end of the day, if you're not tired or ready to sleep, this may suggest that something is off in your planning. The sleep function, so I'm using nerd math language here, may require sufficient physical drain in order to be activated. Choosing when to eat, exercise, study, and so on, make sure that the prerequisites for sleeping are met, and it can be used to ensure you have maximum energy the following day. So, like a common example you might hear people talk about is like, don't drink caffeine too late. So a coffee drunk at, say, 10 a.m. That might be very helpful in stimulating you for social reasons and so on, to help get through a work day and to do better in your work. But if you chose to do that at 10 p.m. at night, so that you could study for an hour or two until midnight, I'm sure a lot of students or people who have been in school have tried something like this. This will probably not be a very good timing thing, because the coffee, its effects last for a certain period, and then you can't activate your sleep ability to regenerate your energy. So it may end up you get 2 hours of good studying, then you toss and turn and you can't sleep at night, and then you have a test next day and you only got 2 hours of sleep and you feel bad, so you failed. It wasn't good. Whereas taking a step back, looking at these things, thinking through it, and making some good choices, you could avoid that sort of unnecessary pain, delay, and lack of progress. So that is my presentation on living life like an RPG, winning a mindset. Thank you for attending my seminar. And if anybody has any additional recommended topics, comments, and so on, feel free to send them to me, and I will try to get back to what you have to say. And yeah, so thanks all for joining today.